For everyone that's been with us since early this morning, this is our third Q&A panel, and I hope everyone is enjoying the boot camp so far. A lot of learning, and I can see we have quite a few individuals that have been with us since the start of the event and are scattered all around the world. So we'll try to get to as many questions as we can on this panel. But first, I want to start by introducing all of the speakers that you've heard over the last couple of hours and introduce everyone. So first off, we have Ashraf Kabir. He's the Head of Technology Consulting over at Visionet Systems. Welcome, Ashraf.
Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you.
Next, I have Roger Yarrow. He's the co-founder and CEO over at TrueLook Construction Cameras. Roger, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Hello, everyone.
Next, Fred Kneip. He's the CEO of Helmet Security. Welcome, Fred.
Thanks, Michael, and welcome, everyone.
Next, we have Antonio Bustamante. He's the co-founder and CEO over at BEM. Welcome, Antonio.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you all.
Next, we have Corey Thuen. He's the founder and CEO of Gravwell. Welcome, Corey.
Cheers.
And finally, we have Sumner Vanderhoof. He's the CEO and co-founder over at Propensity. Welcome, Sumner.
Hey, guys. Thanks.
So I want to start right at the top and see if we can get to as many of the questions that have come in as we can. The first question is from Megan, who is in, Allentown, Pennsylvania, right here in the U.S. And this is a question for Antonio. Antonio, Megan is asking, for teams where a 0.5% error rate is already catastrophic, what's the very first field or workflow you recommend instrumenting with confidence scores and human review, as you discussed in your presentation?
That's a great question. So I think it depends a lot on the industry, right? I am a big fan of doing shadow workflows or shadow process running, meaning you still run in production with your team, just like you've been doing for the last X many years, but in parallel, you're running with whatever tool you decide to automate. Now, 0.5% is actually pretty high, especially if you run at scale. And so more important than the starting point is the delta. Like, how long does it actually, you should talk to your vendor and ask them, like, how long does it take to go from 99.5 to 99.999, like kind of asymptotically? If anyone guarantees you 100, run for the hills. But I would say it depends a lot. Whatever you decide to automate, it should be a meaningful, critical workflow that is in the path of what you actually want to automate. No side project, right? But you should run it as a shadow workflow and compare how you stack up to the existing. That's how I've done it. That's how we've seen our customers do it. That's my own recommendation.
The next question came in from Jason, who's just outside of Springfield, Missouri. And this is for Ashraf. Jason is asking, when a brand realizes AI answers barely mention them, what's the first positioning or narrative change you suggest before they start buying new AI SEO tools?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic question. I think, a lot of the emphasis today has been on the tools part, whereas I think, it has to be still a marketing job, right? You have to really segment your customer, understand what their needs are, and you also need to understand what the other brands are recommending and how they are appearing on top. So, understanding that is the critical part. And yes, the tools help. The tool is an important part of it. But I think it's more than just the tool. It has to be the narrative that we are basically generating for your brand on those AI surfaces and how you're monitoring that, right? So the traffic is going to come. You have to monitor that traffic, attribute that traffic, and understand whether your brand narrative is really working or not. So those are critical elements. Yes, technology and tooling is part of this, but how you basically segment it customer-wise, understand your competition and how AI is actually perceiving it. So I would say first thing that you should think about is, what do you need to do in terms of changing the narrative? What are the places where you need to make those changes? and how you monitor that effect. Those are three critical steps that you will have to kind of do repeatedly to make sure your narrative is really impacting everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, I want to make sure we get to some of our international attendees. So, Corey, this next question is for you, and it comes from Liam, who is in Dunedin, New Zealand. And Liam is asking, if agents are allowed to touch production databases, what guardrails or proxies do you recommend putting in front of those calls before you ever trust them in production?
Yeah, that's a. So we're talking about AI agents running and doing stuff, right? We've seen those make mistakes, delete whole databases and things. So what you can't do is rely on the protections within the prompts of the AI itself, right? Those are just guardrails and the AI can ignore them. I teach a workshop where the attendees, that's our exercise is let's attack the model and get it to go around the guardrails that it has, right? So you do need sort of, luckily, mostly it's old school type things, make sure that the creds that the AI agent has are different than somebody else's. So you can track all that, put in special, security permissions, requests and things. But at the end of the day, if an agent can do what a person can do, then it can cause problems. So make sure that you have auditing capabilities as well, are sort of the core bits. But definitely don't rely on the prompts and the AI companies themselves, because the prompt is just guardrails. Yep.
This next question, I like this because it's something that I think every single individual at the event is probably wondering. So this is for Sumner, and this comes to us from Marcus in Des Moines, Iowa. And Marcus is asking, for a mid-sized B2B startup with modest traffic, what's the smallest version of your de-anonymized visitor plus AI alert use case that you described that they should launch first to prove value?
Just to give a little context on that, there's a workflow that you can set up agents to support both a marketing and sales process at pretty much every stage of the funnel. This one is particularly talking about de-anonymizing website visits. There's an AI like agentic follow-up on the other side of it. So the smallest touch point there is like one visitor. So as long as you can de-anonymize at least one visitor, you can start to prove out the value of the process. I'm a huge advocate for like the hottest cold leads you're ever going to work as a company are the people that are already visiting your site. A phrasing around that is like, it's the highest intent visitor or interaction you're going to have that hasn't filled out a form yet or reached out to sales. So if you can convert those visitors, and conversely, if you can't convert those visitors to conversations, you've got a problem with your messaging, a problem with the audience that's visiting your website, a problem with your ICP. So the sooner you can run that through like the sifter to find the gold nuggets, the better. And, it could be one de-anonymized contact that you think is the best fit, and they pick up the phone and they're like, yeah, I am interested. And that's enough of a signal to keep investing in that process. And then the engine really starts cooking when now the marketing engine is feeding more of those visitors to your website. It's feeding more of that engagement, and you just funnel that right into the engine that you've already set up on the other side. So setting up that engine is the first key, and then just driving traffic through the engine is point number two. And to the question a minute ago about like AI SEO and like where's traffic coming from these days, it can come from AI, it can come from SEM, it can come from outbound, it can come from event traffic that you badge scan with a lead and follow up afterwards. Wherever you drive the traffic from, it has to have a net that you catch it from on the other side and an engine to follow up with. So that engine's got to be in place probably from day one in order to validate the business and in order to validate the what we call message market fit. Otherwise, you're gonna miss opportunities that you could have captured early on. So the sooner the better, setting up that process.
The next question comes to us for Roger. And Roger, this question is from Matteo, who is in, I hope I pronounce this correctly, but Padua, Italy. And Matteo is asking, as you add more AI capabilities to the product and the back office, how do you keep measuring whether each new use actually reduces friction instead of just adding novelty?
That's a really good question, Matteo. So what we've done at TrueLook is we've basically connected a lot of siloed systems, siloed teams, and siloed departments using a lot of AI tooling. So information that was only available to one person or one group of people is now available to all. And, that's information overload. So how do we know it's actually helping? Speed to answer is kind of one of the metrics that is really showing us that this is working. We have basically like a Slack channel, and it's called No Dumb Questions. And if you don't know the answer, you just ask there. And sometimes that question would go there unanswered for hours or days. And that is definitely not any way you want your business to operate. So now someone can ask that question there, and then someone who has access to our tooling goes and just basically repeats the question. The tooling spits out the right answer. You validate it with those around you, and then you can reply to the question. So what we're seeing, how we know this is working, is questions are getting answered faster. The business is moving forward quicker. So definitely the introduction of tooling reduces friction for us because we see faster responses. We get to a solution quicker. And so that's how we know it's working for us versus if you ask a question and you don't get the right answer, you got to take the time to correct the tooling, research the right answer, retrain everything, and then, get back to where you started. So it's a really good question. And for us, we see a lot of improvements in efficiency. And so that's how we're measuring that it's actually working for us.
The next question is for Fred, and it comes to us from Carlos, who's in Madison, Wisconsin. And Carlos is a CISO within his organization. And the question from Carlos is, you mentioned many workers bypass controls for AI. What practical guardrails can security add that nudge people into safer patterns without blocking them outright?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think the general thing out there is when you block developers or people with a job to do, their intention is to follow the rules, but if it stands in the way, they will find ways around. And that is, a typical issue in that sense. It's a matter of how strict you want to be organizationally on that front. And if you're at a large bank, it doesn't matter. Those will be blocked, and you will actually be fired if it's found out that you're working around them. Most startups, smaller businesses, and medium-sized businesses are more tolerant, particularly in the AI age. This is an interesting evolution right now where the adoption is lightning fast, where every CEO out there has made some kind of statement of we're an AI first organization. And that's kind of bled down into everyone feeling enabled on that front. And so I think a lot of it is going to be much more around making sure you know what's going on and monitoring, and being able to then intervene appropriately when you see activity outside of established guardrails or policies, and kind of nudging people back. And what we've seen is kind of a effective, it's kind of actually 2 strikes rule, kind of, hey, we're going to give you a nudge the first time. The second time, we're actually going to take away your access type of approach. I wish I could say, oh, there's a silver bullet for this. This will be an age-old issue in security. Is people constantly trying to work around these. And that's, part of what you're looking in for AI is people have so many different models now accessing, and Corey, you made an interesting comment earlier about kind of how they're starting to access more and more sensitive data in a typically unknown way. And so getting tooling around that to ensure you at least know what's happening, and then determining based on your culture and your organization how you want to then intervene.
Antonio, the next question comes in for you, and it's from Lauren, who's in Savannah, Georgia. And Lauren is asking, many executives see human in the loop as extra labor. How do you reframe production human in the loop as a way to lower total risk and cost, not just add headcount?
Totally. So I think the way I see it is every company we've worked with that has used AI thinking they're going to replace their teams entirely, really with the goal of just eliminating headcount, just has utterly failed. And the main issue is expectations, right? I think the idea that you can replace most business processes within 1 or 2 quarters by automating most tasks is pretty much unproven, even though the narrative in the market is otherwise. And so what we've seen is AI works best in processes where you're interested in continuing to increase revenue while keeping your labor costs nonlinear, right? And the best example that I can give is most people I've worked with are thinking more about increasing revenue with their existing team. Now, of course, that has labor ramifications downstream, but the company is thinking more about it in growth sense. I would say it's looking at your labor as a cost center versus as a competitive advantage. And so I would encourage these teams to think about labor as like, okay, what is the alpha of the company, and what is the acquired knowledge and tribal knowledge that is already baked into the company versus how much can they actually achieve with AI? Take AI and just automate what your humans shouldn't have been doing in the first place, rather than trying to eliminate them completely. And so that's how I would think about it. I think obviously it has ramifications in the future when it comes to actually new labor generation. And it's more about new labor generation, less about eliminating headcount. And of course, like any company, especially as you get to scale, reconversion of the productive model of the company. So a lot of the people that used to do tasks that should have been automated 10, 15 years ago, what is their purpose now in the company, and how do you reallocate resources, rather than thinking about it as like, it's all about heads and let's just remove people out of the equation.
The next question came in for Ashraf, and this is from Olivia, who is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And Olivia is asking, for a mid-sized retailer seeing more AI referred traffic but weak conversions, what's the quickest on-site experience tweak that usually improves those sessions?
That's a great question. I think, one of the realization was the last holiday season that happened in 2025, where actually we reached an inflection point where the conversion rate for AI related traffic actually increased more than 2.5 times over the year. And that surpassed. So for example, people coming in through normal web search, they were less likely to convert as for people who were recognized that they were coming from an AI engine, like for example, the AI overviews. They were more likely to convert at the customer. The thing that for a mid-tier company, I think, what is important is, how do you monitor? How do you know when the customer is coming is an AI mediated customer versus a normal visitor, right? Because once a person is coming through the AI channel, he's already made up his mind. He's done all the research, he's evaluated, leveraged AI to understand, okay, this brand is actually going to solve my need. So when they're coming through that channel, you have to be prepared to actually treat them as a VIP customer. And there's a tooling around it, there's a whole process around it, there could be engines around it, and we do offer those kind of capabilities. We've built some solutions that can actually monitor the customer and treat them like a VIP customer. We can also understand what intent that customer is coming with and actually direct them and actually engineer that entire experience. So for example, if he's already made an intent about a particular type of shoe, you should actually already add that shoe in the shopping cart and show him that experience, right? So he can just click on the next step and just go with it, right? So those kind of experiences we need to really think about, and those are actually very dependent on at that particular context of the customer. So we have to understand for that mid-tier retailer to really think about it from the customer segment that they're targeting, what is the intent, and how they develop their experiences. Yes, so I hope I've been able to answer.
No, I think that was great. And Corey, this next question comes in for you from Denise, who is just outside of Spokane, Washington. And Denise is asking, for security teams just starting with AI auditing, what's the simplest log signal they should collect so they can at least answer, what did the agent do after an incident?
That is a bit complicated because it depends on what the agent is doing and where they're at. If you want to know, like if it's a coding agent or something, then you need to be able to answer every executable process that ran on this machine. Right. So, but the good news is like that, those are logs that you should be collecting anyway. And not everybody does, right? Everybody's on their security maturity path for what they're doing. But yeah, step 0 is just get the data. So that way, if something does happen, then you can look back and ask the questions. So get the data, put it in a spot. So yeah, endpoint events for, what process did what. DNS is a really good one. For right, you just need the different telemetry, and then you can kind of audit it like a person or like an investigation or some malware. It's just computers just do things faster, or the AI agents make the mistakes faster. So juice up your auditing capabilities or your log collection stuff, and it is a lot of the same techniques at the end of the day, but you want to wire them up to automations and things so that you can respond much faster as well. But
makes great sense. Sumner, this next question came in for you. It's from Lauren, who's just outside of Savannah, Georgia. And Lauren is asking, once an agent is enriching website visitors and routing them, how do you decide when it's safe to let it trigger outbound sequences automatically versus just notifying sales?
That's the the AI SDR agent, right? Like I like to think of them more as like sales companions these days than agents. I think that's an interesting term in the AI space. The companion, I think, can be like, I think early on it was used to describe like personal companions, support agents for your own personal lives. But now I think the companion, like the professional companion, should sit sidecar. I think there was a question a minute ago about the human in the loop being a drawdown on process within the company. I don't think it has to be. It's like Antonio was saying a minute ago, like it can be like an accelerant. Like everybody that replaced people with AI is kind of bringing people back anyway, and putting them in the right spots within the company. So I would say it's not. It can be an automation, just like Outreach.io or Apollo or any of the sales enablement platforms, like automate emails just to make workflow automation easier. So you're not doing the administrative task of click and send on an email every time a web visit comes in. I would think of the AI companion or the sales companion is the way we think of it here, as like an AI automation, and just moving that automation from a decision tree logical flow in a workflow system to a prompt-based instruction. If this, then this just becomes a prompt, a natural language prompt. So when it comes to fully automating sales touches, or even like round robin assignments to sales reps, we're moving away from orchestration being a manual decision tree, and orchestration is now a prompt-based interface. So I'm a huge fan of using those companions, those agents, for automating workflows, just as long as there's a human in the loop sidecar with them at some point along the way, to Corey's point, so they don't, agents are built by humans, so they make human mistakes just faster. I think that's a great point. You don't want sales representation out in the wild doing human, poorly trained behaviors on behalf of your business. So careful what you automate with AI. Always have a human in the loop, have some monitoring built around it, some audit trails. What do they call that? Traceability, explainability, all the different components to it. But man, embrace the power at the same time, right? Like put the agents in the right spots in the business. It's an accelerant, as long as there's somebody there to monitor it and hold its hand at times.
So the next question comes in for Roger, and this is from Tyler, who is right in Boise, Idaho. And Tyler is asking, when you connect internal systems with an AI layer, what was the first cross-team friction point you targeted to prove this was more than just another dashboard?
Yeah. Hey, Tyler, good question. So what we did was we connected our product. So our product is its own siloed system with our CRM. So basically what sales and marketing would use every day was disconnected from our product. And we saw a lot of value in connecting those two things together, getting a lot of user data back and forth between the systems, because what we find, especially for our business, a lot of the people we sell to, a lot of our buyers aren't necessarily our users. And so we had a gap there, and we found a lot of value in kind of sharing that data back and forth. That was an easy connection because it didn't really impact what anybody did. We didn't have to make any changes. The product continued to be the product. The CRM continued to be the CRM. But now we had a lot more data available between them to draw connections on user behavior, account behavior, where there were expansion opportunities. And then it just sort of scaled from there for us, connecting our ERP in, financial systems, and other things. And all of this was very rigorously permissioned, with very, very controlled rules on who could ask what about which system. But really the accelerant for us was kind of each team getting clarity into what users were doing and what data was not available in the product for the CRM and vice versa. So, we just tiptoed into it. But once we got one system talking to the other well, we saw a lot of value in, adding those other systems. But, to answer your question, the CRM and the product, that's been a boon for us in getting a lot more insights into what our customers do, what our buyers do, and what our users need for additional marketing and sales opportunities.
We're making good progress. I see we had just a ton of questions come in from these presentations. But Fred, the next one came in for you, and it's a great one that I think will be beneficial for a lot of members of the audience. So this is from Jason, who's in Springfield, Missouri. And Jason is asking, when connecting MCP agents to systems like Salesforce, et cetera, what's your baseline least privilege policy so models can be useful without being able to move or delete data?
That's a great question. And so, yeah, the basic recognition here is the way agents talk to software solutions or databases is typically through a variety of methods, but MCP is the kind of preeminent one today. And one of the big issues that Jason's talking about here is an MCP server typically will have a variety of things it can do. Data it can access, processes it can run, and it's default full availability for everyone. And that is a problem because security runs on the concept of least privilege, which is you should only be able to do what your job requires. And now I have this privilege to do anything. And I think, Corey, you had mentioned, I'm going to keep going back to your comment on, there are instances where someone through an MCP connection has deleted a whole database because they had access to that they shouldn't. So it's really a key element here is finding a solution, somewhat self-serving because that's what we do, but there are plenty of other providers out there that helps you limit what tools, what resources are available in any given MCP connection. It's actually a very easy implementation. It just ensures, one, I know when people are making them, and two, I can now put some level of control that's either user-based or other in place. And so we've typically just followed what have been historically in other authentication tools. So here's what different user groups have in terms of their privileges, their access, and then default down to a minimum and let people ask for versus let me give you full availability. Writing is one of the permissions that you typically want to hold back on unless you're putting an agent out there that's meant to overwrite. And a lot of AI tools today are much more on data processing and inference and say, let me look at trends here and there. I only need read access to be able to do that. So starting on that level and then figuring out where do I want to go. More powerful agents do need the write access. Okay, I will now update the customer file to do this, et cetera. But not everyone in your company needs that. So being able to find a tool that says, I see where these connections are, I will limit this to these specific groups. And that's something that's being done every day today.
As we're wrapping up, I'm going to toss the last question out to Antonio. Antonio, this is from Daniel, who is in Galway, Ireland. And Daniel is asking, in highly regulated sectors like insurance or banking, where do you start when turning an existing black box AI process into something auditable enough for regulators?
I think that's a really good question. I think there are two spots. One, probably the hardest, is to actually, these models that we use under the hood, they have probabilities. Those probabilities can be used. Most systems don't leverage them because it's complicated to service them up, and you need to digest them, and you need to apply them in a wise way for the purpose. But I think if the process is very structured and very well sort of guardrailed, these probabilities are extremely helpful to understand essentially the distribution of how confident the model is at different times when it's generating an output, right? We use this. I think it's incredibly helpful. It doesn't tell you necessarily the full picture, but it gives you one, let's call it like actual, like how confident is the model that the final output is actually useful. And you can use it in many, many different ways. The other completely different and probably easier is step by step, almost like an event-driven system, right? I don't know if most of you remember kind of business process management, BPM. It started being the crazy rave in the 90s, early 2000s. It's kind of coming back. Each of those steps and each of those swim lanes can be well documented. It should be well documented. Most companies I work with don't have it well documented. And so documenting each part of your SOP and almost creating these like steps that are really very guardrailed in an event-driven way so that you can understand where the agent is going at any given step in the process, I think is really important. That's something that is really hard to do with a general purpose agent like a Claude or a ChatGPT because it's a ping pong, right? Rather than something that is very guardrailed. And so I would encourage people to build, especially for regulated industries, you need something that is very guardrailed so that you can inspect every step, right? And kind of see where the agent, what is the trace of reasoning and where each of these steps is failing. Those are the two places where I would start. Probably the latter is the easiest. The first one I mentioned requires just a little bit of R&D, not a lot. Most model providers surface these probabilities today in API, so that's helpful.
Fantastic. Well, for everyone listening in, if you have any questions or would like to reach out to any of the speakers on this panel or any of the speakers that you've heard during the event, up at the top of the site, you'll see that big orange button that'll get you connected. And from this end, Ashraf, Roger, Fred, Antonio, Corey, Sumner, I'd like to thank everyone for the time and fantastic presentations today during the event and for your thoughts and answering all of those questions on this panel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.